President Obama has used his first Father's Day weekend in office to deliver a strong message to dads across the globe. Take responsibility. It's a particularly acute statement coming from a president who grew up without one. But the subject of fatherhood and how to get it right is attracting a lot of headlines on both sides of the Atlantic at the moment. A controversial new book out here suggests the modern, caring, sharing dad might not be all he's cracked up to be. More on that in a moment, but first our US correspondent Greg Milam reports on President Obama's big Father's Day message.
When you're probably the world's most famous dad, advice on how to be a good father certainly carries some extra weight. As Barack Obama honoured some of America's most inspiring fathers at the White House, he also launched what he calls a nationwide conversation on responsible fatherhood.
I think you made the right point, Ed, which is that's where young people get sort of their images of what it means to be a man.
It is a familiar theme for the president. His own father left the family's home in Hawaii when Obama was 2, and he saw him only once more. And during the election campaign, he criticised absentee fathers, particularly in the black community, for not showing enough responsibility. He chose Father's Day weekend to renew that message.
Some of you know the statistics. Children who grow up without fathers are more likely to drop out of school and wind up in prison. They're more likely to have substance abuse problems, run away from home, and become teenage parents themselves. And I say this as someone who grew up without a father in my own life. Now, I had a heroic mom and wonderful grandparents who helped raise me and my sister. And it's because of them that I'm able to stand here today. But despite all their extraordinary love and attention, that doesn't mean that I didn't feel my father's absence. That's something that leaves a hole in a child's heart that a government can't fill.
The president's family life is as high profile as it gets. First Lady Michelle and the couple's daughters, Sasha and Malia, are central to the White House public image. And even the president's official number 2 offered his voice in support.
If my son, Attorney General Captain Biden, walked in the door from Iraq today, first thing he'd do is walk up and give me a kiss. It gives me more joy, and I think it gives every father in this room more joy than any other thing that happens in your life, whether your son or daughter does that. So, Mr. President, you're a great president, you're a great dad, and you're really good to be doing this. It's a big deal.
Of course, when dad's the most powerful politician in the world and home is his office, things are a little easier. Obama says he's made mistakes as a father. Learning from them is a lesson he wants others to follow. Greg Milam, Sky News, Washington.
Well, with me now is Nick Duerden, the author of The Reluctant Fathers Club, which aims to break the conspiracy of silence around fatherhood and calls for a better debate on the role of the male parent. And there in his West London home is the writer and journalist and father of 4, Toby Young. After morning to you both. Nick, first to you, Reluctant Fathers Club. Does that, I mean, some people think that means you didn't want kids.
At first, I think I needed convincing. I'd never had kids before. Nobody I knew had ever had kids. I didn't really grow up with a father myself, so I had no positive role models. So the idea of giving up everything that I knew to jump into, for what was for me the complete unknown, took some convincing, yeah.
So what your book talks about is the pros and cons and an awareness of what it's actually going to be like, something that perhaps men don't talk about.
Well, I just know that when my wife became pregnant, I went to the bookshops to read it. I just wanted to read as much as I could on what it's like to become a father. I saw some fantastic books for women which were really frank and candid, and the only books I could find for men were how-to guides. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to read somebody's journey, and that wasn't there, so I just tried to write it myself.
Let's go over to Toby. You have 4, fair play to you, lots of hard work. Bonding, people say fathers have trouble with particularly young children.
Yeah, it's quite tough. I think the problem is that women these days, modern educated women, want dads to be hands-on. They want them to share the child-rearing responsibilities, but they're very reluctant to cede control in the domestic arena. And the upshot is that often dads just end up as their kind of incompetent assistants. And I think that, in the end, diminishes the role of the father within the household. And that's corroborated by the way in which fathers are generally portrayed in popular culture. We've become the new mothers-in-law with a butt of every joke.
That's interesting, Toby. You talk about the role of the father. How would you define your role as a father, then?
Well, at the moment, you know, I feel a bit like someone who's just entered an entry-level position at Wernham Hogg, and I've got David Brent to deal with on an almost daily basis, who I'm afraid finds me more and more irritating.
Well, why, Toby, do you think there has been a reluctance, maybe that's too strong a word, but not talk about fatherhood and not be open about the emotions, the distress that you go through when you have a new baby?
Is that one addressed to Nick or to me?
No, to you, Toby.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I agree with Nick there. I haven't detected this conspiracy of silence. On the contrary, fathers are all too willing to talk about the trials and tribulations of fatherhood, and often I think the problem is that they just won't shut up. And it's partly because we've got this image now of these kind of whinging, complaining wimps, that fatherhood in general has got an image problem.
It changes everything, doesn't it, Nick, having a baby? Not just having another person in your life, but your relationships with everybody around you.
Absolutely, and the balance of power shifts in the house, and you have to find your new footing in that. And going back to what Toby was saying before, during the research of the book, I found there were lots of help and support groups for mothers, almost none for men, and those that I did find for men could get only 1 or 2 people attending a week, and they would invariably have to talk about sport first before segueing into the...
But that's the male macho image, isn't it?
It is, and also, when you have kids, you have to kind of step up and be responsible. So if you're kind of suffering a little bit or scrambling around, it's difficult to admit that weakness at a time when you need to be really strong.
Do you believe, Nick, that paternal postnatal depression exists?
I don't know if I'm qualified to comment on it. I do know that during the research of the book somebody told me that it was on the rise, but that nobody had really gone into it to study it because it was also mother-centric. And in many ways it should be mother-centric. The mother goes through far more than we ever do, but we go through an emotional adjustment as well, and it may affect the way we parent, so it's kind of good to talk about and to be aware that it is there.
Yeah, Toby, one of the things that's happening in my house, I have a 2-year-old, is paternal rejection. My husband feels rejected by the child because mummy is always best, and the dad is pushed to one side. It's a terribly emotional roller coaster you go through for the first, I don't know how many years, you tell me.
Yeah, I'm holding out hope for parental rejection. Unfortunately, when I walk in the door, my kids are bundling on top of me. I'm a human climbing frame. I think the main complaint that many of my friends who are fathers have is that we feel like we've made all these concessions. We've essentially agreed to cede our position as heads of the household, as the sole breadwinners, and we're mucking in, we're doing a lot, and we get no gratitude. You know, we're barely tolerated, in fact.
Yeah, but women don't get gratitude. What about the women? We don't get the gratitude either.
Well, but you complained for years that you didn't get it, so you know how it feels. Why not give us some? You know, women. It's a bit like, I think men feel a bit like Mikhail Gorbachev. You know, we've ceded power in this bloodless revolution. We've given you everything you asked, but instead of being grateful, you look on us with barely concealed disdain. You even say, "We don't fancy you anymore because you've given in too easily."
All right, I'm not going to respond to that. Let's just pause a moment. We're going to go to a clip. Of a major new film project taking place in the States. It's men talking about fatherhood, and they're all terribly open and upfront about it. And I guess, Nick, one of the things about this is that it's good to talk.
I guess it is. I don't know much about the film project itself. If it's, I wonder how American it is, and it's very schmaltzy. I love you, Dad. That wasn't the kind of book I kind of wanted to write. More, I just wanted to write about the journey, and that I was reluctant to begin with, and now I'm a complete convert.
Yeah.
And if I can do it, I guess anyone can.
Let's have a quick look and then see how schmaltzy it is.
Okay.